She does that.
She's colorful.
Good morning in advance. How are you? You too, huh?
Morning, everyone. It's just about time to start our meeting. We have some committee members who are hard of hearing.
What the chairman's
We're starting our meeting.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Hey, David.
How you doing?
Oh, man.
Good morning, everyone. If you will find your seats, and as usual, we begin our committee off with the prayers. So, Representative Hatt, if you'll just push your button for me. All right, we'll open our meeting with a prayer.
Dear Father, thank you for this day and that we can come together, and thank you for this beautiful state that you bless us with. And we just ask that you guide us with wisdom to make decisions on our state and where we move forward. And we pray that everyone has a blessed day, and they pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And our meeting today will be focused on forestry. And last week I had to cut off your introduction to the committee. So Mr. Sabo, Commissioner Sabo will be talking to us more. But for our committee as a whole, I've also asked that after we finish our overview of our forestry, that I found the brief presentation last week of disaster mitigation and resilience to be the most succinct expression of what our state is trying to do now to deal with our disasters. And, you know, no disaster sends us an invitation and asks if they can come to the state. It's upon us, and our response has to be really good. So several of our committees now are focusing not only, we have the disaster, but it's the mitigation and the resilience pieces that we're working on. So I thought this might be informative for the committee. So, Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Sabo, if you'll come up, please. And do you want to sit? You're okay to sit? All right,
yes,
which
ma'am.
way? All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good morning. Chair Lady Smith and committee, thank you for this opportunity again. I didn't feel too rushed last time, but I really appreciate the opportunity to come back and talk a little bit about the commission and what we do and kind of how we do it, specifically to disasters. You know, once again, just to hit on some of the brief topics as far as just our mission and our vision. I'm never going to stop, you know, throwing this plug in there that we really are an emergency response organization. You know, leadership, service, but protect and conserve, and that protect makes up a huge part of our organization. Roughly 400 of that 524 employees, they are emergency responders. The unique thing about us is, while wildland fire is our main goal, it's an all hazard response. And I will get into some of that later on in the presentation. One thing I didn't touch on last time was the prescribed fire last year. We talked about how important prescribed fire is to resilience and kind of playing offense, if you will. We had one of our best years ever last year for prescribed fire with a little over 1.5 million acres. In the last 30 years, last year was one of our best years when we talk about not just a commission, but all practitioners as a whole. So really good year, setting us up good going into this winter and this spring. Something else I do want to touch on was last year 289 personnel deployed. So emergencies are happening all over the nation, right, every day. And when we're secure here at home, our folks will go out and help neighboring states, and everywhere from the West Coast, Upper Peninsula of Michigan during the Canadian wildfires, that was burning, helping out Michigan, to Alaska. Louisiana a couple of years ago was having some massive wildfires. So if we're secure here, we will go help other states, and that really lends a lot of value to our folks. It's critical for their training, and I mean we got to learn this stuff, and I'd rather learn it on somebody else's turf, to be honest with you. So that's a really good experience to get that. Just some of our outward-facing program areas and how it all ties together. Forest management and protection are really our two bookends, and we'll dive deeper into that. But the law enforcement, we touched on how important the arson investigation is and what that team does. The utilization, going back to really the association's main focus, but having that healthy markets lead to healthy forests, and really once again leads to just kind of playing offense. And then the public relations. So operations and how are we structured? How does that set us up for success when we start looking at emergency response? So we're divided into 5 regions, and each of those regions has 2 fire management officers, a lead forester, a training officer, and on down. And we're set up for span of control. So under an emergency, you can't manage 30 people, right? You can barely manage 10 or 12. 5 to 7 people, that's your optimal range for managing something under an emergency. So we are structured in such a way that we have that overhead and depth naturally built into our organization. Each one of these managers has full reign, full freedom to kind of move resources as they need to. So we try to eliminate roadblocks. They don't have to call up to the headquarters and say, well, I need to move resources here or there. They need to do whatever is needed for that emergency response. If they need resources outside the region, they can call their neighbors. If they need them from outside the state, they can call us and we can start moving them in. One important part to these regions and what really helps in emergency response is getting to know your local sheriffs, fire chiefs, EM directors. And that's really step one for any emergency response. And it's as simple, and I'll kind of use a little bit of a southern thing here, but if they can't walk up to them, in a restaurant and do the genuine "how's your mama" and them kind of thing, they don't know them well enough. And that becomes really important under an emergency like Helene, because once that emergency's happened, everybody is stressed. They're worried about their family, they're worried about everything else. So if it's not a friendly face, it's not somebody you already know, they're probably not going to deal with you. And then one thing these region managers do is they keep a key contact list. So when we had folks from our Region 1 moving south to help out, they can tie in with that manager. And if they're going to Berrien County, that manager can hand them a list of the key contacts, names, cell phone numbers, where they're located, so that outside resources that may not know them can immediately tie in with them and go help them. One of the things we utilize in wildland fire, and it's really it took off after 9/11 with like FEMA and other groups, but it's all hazard incident management teams. I'll take a second to recognize my deputy here, Chris Butler. So Chris is my new deputy, but Chris was the incident commander over our team during Helene. Has a wealth of experience. Georgia used to have a team a long time ago. Just for multiple reasons, it went away. We started building it back almost 2 years ago. This was actually last summer. They were out on the Washington Peninsula managing a private fire on some Rainier property. So once again, just getting a wealth of experience and what a team does. That a team doesn't necessarily manage the incidents. They bring order to the chaos, right? They support the frontline workers so that they don't have to worry about what they're eating, where they're sleeping, where they're getting fuel, any of that stuff. They can just work, and that makes all the difference in the world. They also do things like have roaming safety officers to make sure we keep people safe. They have county liaisons that go tie in with the EM directors and kind of put their hand on their shoulders when they're stressed and saying, hey, have you thought of this? Let us do this for you. Put in that request up to GMA, and then let us take care of this for you. Let us clear these roads. Let us assess this. And so that really makes a big difference. One of the other things they do that's most important is they ensure proper communications. So one of the things that we received last year, and if anybody in this group had anything to do with it, I want to say thank you, was the new Harris radios. That interoperability between agencies, but when nothing else worked, when your cell phone said SOS, when all of our towers were down, we could pick up those radios and talk. So the folks in the field, we could immediately communicate with and know that they were okay, their family was okay, and then also make sure that they had a good briefing, and then what do you need, what supplies do you need, and just having that communication back and forth. So I showed this slide last time, and I'll take a little bit deeper dive, but the 40,000 miles of roadways cleared was just an unbelievable effort. But that, once again, that success comes down to the willingness of our people, but more than that, it's them having the support that they need to be able to accomplish that mission. It's having somebody behind the scenes tied in with the EM director, helping kind of guide and move the pieces, if you will. Up to 400 of our staff engaged. That, the first few days after the storm, it was only 85, 90 folks. And I remember kind of a few folks looking at me saying, well, you got more than that when you get more engaged. Well, here's the hard truth. You can't help the incident. You can't help anybody if you're part of the incident, right? So how I explain it to our team, I'm going to make an assumption everybody here has flown commercial, right? There's a reason they tell you put the mask on yourself before you put it on your child. You can't help anybody if your roof is blown off, if your family's in danger. Your mind's going to be there. It's not going to be helping the incident. So it takes a moment to help your people, make sure they're engaged, their family's okay, so that they can go and assist and do what they need to. Other efforts that we did that really just getting seen a lot, but critically important, was we hauled generators to nursing homes. We flew in critical resources with our aviation fleet from neighboring states. Just anything and everything really rolled through this team to help put resources on the ground. And then when the incident's done and we start getting into recovery phase, I think we backhauled about 140 trailers, back scattered all over the countryside, getting those trailers back here to Atlanta. So really just a massive effort, and it really never stops. It'll be, that response phase is for 2 weeks. This recovery phase will be 5 years plus. And that's the hard thing. Everybody wants it done now. We're a society of we want everything fixed right now. And unfortunately, after an event like this, that's just not the case. There's no substitute for time and hard work. So forest management plays a huge role in this. I've been talking about forest protection a lot, that side of the shop, but the forest management is really what our landowners now lean on when we start talking about recovery and what do they do, how do they do it, where do they go to? My retirement, my grandkids' college is on the ground. So how do we recover from this? The first thing that we have to do is we have to back up and we have to assess what do we actually have. I can tell you, usually when you cruise a stand of timber, it may take a few days up to a week. Now we are cruising 8.9 million acres. So we're able to use some satellite imagery, some different data that we get in. Unfortunately, we kind of know what's going to happen to trees under certain wind speeds. There's been enough of that in the country. So we can start laying some models on there. But one of the things we knew from the storm was it was moving so quick, and that eastern eye wall, just the damage that was on the ground wasn't corresponding with what we were actually seeing. So I mentioned last time that our foresters put in 2,800 plots immediately following the storm. So the map that's on your left-hand side, each one of those blocks is 1 square mile, and that was I'm sure if you were to overlay a road system map on this, you would see we basically had to follow roads. But the the deeper red the block, the more damage it was done. So this started kind of giving us our map, if you will, on, where's the damage, what percent damage are we looking at, and we could start tying in our numbers of, what are we actually facing and what are we dealing with. The other thing we did was, although it wasn't really in depth, was just any mill that asphalt is trying to figure out, where do we need to focus, where do we kind of need to put our crews to help damage it. We would give them the map that you see on the right-hand side that basically had a 50 and 100-mile radius with their impacted counties, and ask them to focus their salvage efforts there to help the landowners. So the markets and challenges for just traditional forestry, right? Mill capacity. Even if you could get all the wood off the ground, the mills can't process it fast enough before it's going to rot. Logger capacity, you don't have enough loggers to get it off the ground. And a logger is typically not going to leave their area of where they're working to move in somewhere else. It's hard on the equipment, and equipment's made to cut trees standing up, not laid out like a bunch of matchsticks, right? So, really, that would be huge production loss for them. Some do if they're working on the fringes, but for the most part, you're not going to pull a group of loggers out of Alabama to come help out. That's not how the industry works. The demand for wood products, but now as we move forward, seedling capacity. Even if we could get all up today, we couldn't plant it all next year. I can tell you all the nurseries are ramping up to do everything they can, but that's just going to be a process to reestablish everything. And then contractor capacity. Site prep contractors, tree planters, all of them. There's just, we typically don't have this much wood on the ground at one time. So these are the processes that our foresters are trying to work through with the landowners. And, what's your goal? What time frame are we looking at? And how do we help get you somebody here to kind of meet your needs? So that is what our foresters are doing every day. I can tell you right now, they are working, they're typically a forester works anywhere from, I'd say, 250 to 350 cases a year of just general management advice. We're already seeing numbers into the 350s, and we're not even close to the end of the fiscal year. They're trying to get with every landowner that they possibly can. And the reason that's important is because every single tract is different. If you ride through there, not everything is on the ground, right? Some tracts have 50% loss. Are those trees leaning, or is a root ball pulled out of the ground and they're still going to die anyway and we need to get them? Can the landowner wait for the market to recover to where maybe they can recoup some of their profit and do something better later? So it really is. It's very individualized, and every single tract has to be touched and have that communication. The fuel mitigation program, that's being administered by our forest management group. That program really, it does benefit the landowner to help them recoup some of the cost from cleanup. But on top of it, what it does from a safety standpoint is it gives us openings kind of dotted all over the countryside, if you will. Right? We don't know where the next fire is going to be. We know where we have our heaviest fuel loading, in and around communities and homes. But this gives us strategically a place to make a stand. So when we start looking at this map, and the deeper the red, the more counties are signed up. This lets us know where we need to focus and what our priorities are. So the landowners that have signed up and been approved, once again, we work with those landowners and keep them engaged, help them find the contractors that they need. It really just be there for them for whatever. And if they need somebody to vent to, then we're going to sit there and listen. Additional events, and some of this was some lessons learned after Michael, that everybody wants information and they want it now. The hardest thing to hear is after something like this, there's no silver bullet. There's not one answer that's going to make you whole or that's going to fix it. But what we can do is start doing things like making sure we're communicating. So partnering with the Georgia Forestry Association, they were very grateful in hosting 5 regional workshops in the impact area to where we could get landowners in. They had a brilliant idea of having tables like a logger, consulting forester. We had Dr. Lee with UGA, who's a tax expert, multiple people there that landowners could go see, and then we'd present to them and be very honest of like, hey, you're not going to find a silver bullet, but you have to start, and here's how these pieces work together. UGA, partnering with them, they had more technical workshops for some of your professional foresters and landowners are a little more engaged of what to look for, what to do, and we got a little bit more specific with them. And in the federal program, Emergency Forest Restoration Program, although it's a program through FSA, what many don't realize is we are the technical advisors to that. We are the boots on the ground. We do the work. So trying to get landowners engaged in that program to go sign up with FSA, and then FSA will turn around and give us the record so we can go meet with the landowner, advise them, and help best utilize the money to accomplish their goal. So that's kind of the management side of things. So protection, once again, that immediately starts with fire breaks. When we put this program out, we did it on a ranking system, looking at fuel loading, communities, critical infrastructure. Where are we going to have to make a stand? And started with just opening existing fire breaks in roads. So we're not establishing new fire breaks. We're just trying to get into old fire breaks that are already established and reopen them back up. I can tell you that they are getting after this every single day in every single one of those counties, and it's really rough going. Right now, I want to say it's maybe just a hair better than this, but for the most part, it's a mile an hour is what we can clean out. So when you think about how many miles of lines that we have to put down and how much work is ahead, we'll be doing fire breaks in roads for probably the next couple of years, and that's okay. I mean, that's what we're there for, and that's what we need to do. I'm gonna play this video real quick, and I appreciate the Forestry Association for letting us use it. But for those that haven't got to visit the impact area, this is just really good footage of what you see out there and what happened to some of the older timber. There's no sound to it. And as you're looking, it's kind of hard to see. Some of the stands on the outside, they weren't quite as thick, weren't quite as big, but they still have about 50% damage within the stand. So when we start talking, when these tops start catching on fire and fire pushes through there, trying to catch that becomes almost near impossible. What you see on TV out west of it being an aerial firefighting show is our new realization in areas like this. We will have to give it a lot of room and build a lot of line, but that's where the putting in the fire breaks now helps us. So we talked about the fuels on the ground and what that means. So our future, and it's not a complicated process. We have all the sunlight that's hitting the forest floor that wasn't hitting it before, right? So now we're going to have, this spring, we're going to have all the grasses and everything else growing, things continuing to dry out. Once those cure next winter, those will start burning. And then everybody's going to be out burning tops in the yards and typical stuff. Unfortunately, our number one cause of wildfires in the state is escape fires, typically somebody debris burning in their backyard. Right, so that's coming. 2, 3, 4 years from now, the heavier pines, the larger pines, we call those 10,000 hour fuels, those will start to burn. Those become receptive to burning. And that's when we start dealing with a lot of smoke issues, and it really just lasting days, if not weeks, because it is so hard to extinguish. Unfortunately, that's not even the worst of it yet. The worst of it will come in about 5 to 7 years when the hardwoods start burning. If we get any sort of drought, and if you've rode through there, you know what those hardwood bottoms look like. They become receptive to burn. And, anytime you build a fire in your backyard or in your fireplace and you do it with a piece of oak, it's because it puts out the most BTUs and burns long and burns hot. Well, that's great for a warming fire. It's bad for a wildfire, and especially when you have that much of it on the ground. So I hit on this slide last time and basically kind of saying the same thing, but we know what our outlook is. We know what work we need to do, and then also being prepared, having our team prepared, working with our neighboring states. What resources do you have if we have to call upon you? And then also just from a firefighting equipment size. If we start having a lot of fires in this area, I can grab all of our tractors in the north end of the state all day long and pull them down, but they're not going to do any good. They're smaller tractors, and they can't push and work in that type of environment. So really it takes larger equipment, and some of that we have in this area. But your John Deere 450 or 650 isn't going to do anything, and we have a lot of those in the mountains. It's going to be your 700s, 850s, D6s. It's going to be larger, bigger tractors, bigger equipment that has to work in this type of environment. So while I can grab people if we have a vacant tractor and move them down, we're going to be limited on what type of resources can operate in this environment. One thing we really pay attention to is our fire outlook. Y'all know it's hard to predict the weather 2 weeks from now, much less months from now, but still we try to look at trends and what's going on. So it's always a 4-month outlook. So on your left is February. Obviously, if you're in red, that's not so good. It means increased fire danger, fire outlook. So February, increased fire outlook. March, increased outlook. April, still increased outlook right there through that same path. And then although Georgia's barely in it for May, it still skirts the coast. And, I have a hard time believing that little clip right there is going to be left out where the Okefenokee Swamp is. It's I want to say 2017 maybe was our last large fires down there. So it's been a minute. So there's a lot of fuel loading, a lot that's primed to burn down there as well. Thank goodness that didn't quite get impacted with the storm like everything else, but it doesn't take long. You don't have to drive too far out of that far southeastern corner before you get into storm debris. So, we're really paying attention to the droughts, to the river levels. What does that mean for us? What resources do we need to start stocking in pretty quick? But at the end of the day, I'll leave you with this. In emergency response and planning, it comes down to knowing your local community leaders and knowing them on a personal level, and then also understanding that when your whole county just got rocked like many of them did, even though they may be the sheriff or the EM director or whatever title they hold, nobody's actually Superman. And they have to take care of their family before they can take care of the incident. So that's where it comes important to training, to partnering with neighboring states, neighboring counties. Who could you bring in assist to help? And just kind of letting your ego down. Out of all the emergencies I've worked, we had that at the higher level. I'll tell you, there was a group text with myself and Director Stallings, Russell McMurray, Walter Rabin, multiple people on there, and just constant communication. There was no ego or no pride or my agency's going to handle this, y'all handle that. It was, hey, this is the mission. Who can help us here, or what can we do better? And that was really refreshing to see, because sometimes, and unfortunately, politics really can't get in the way of stuff like this, and it could become territorial. And that's when it becomes territorial. That doesn't benefit anybody. So the agencies working together was just quite honestly refreshing. That was a really good, I'd say, a good win for Georgia, a good win for the citizens of the state. And I'm thankful for our people, and I'm thankful we could be a part of it and help out in a time of need like this. And I will stop right there, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and we're getting lots of questions, so I'm grateful you're able to come back. I think the first thing, we have not experienced a serious drought in a very long time.
Yes, ma'am.
And that eventually is going to hit us. And then also, I think there's still confusion why the state of Georgia does control burns, and what does that mean, and then compared to places that don't. And in a minute, I'm going to have to leave, but
Yes,
my number 2 domo here, Vance Smith, will take over chairing.
Okay. So for the control burns, I mean, it starts with really it's a way of life here, right? Like our ecosystem greatly depends on it. The health of our forest, flora and fauna, everything really depends on it. Fire is really one of the best, most effective, and cheapest management tool that we have. But on top of that, it helps reduce the fuel loads. So when I look at a very robust fire program, and we're supporting prescribed fire, not just on the installations or on public lands, but on private lands, it helps reduce that fuel load. And I apologize, I can't remember if I said this to the group last time or not, but the video I had last time, that guy's on the tractor and he's pushing through. At some point, you have to cut off the head of the fire. You have to go in front of it and stop it. Would you rather do that in an area that's never been burned, or an area that gets burned every 2 to 3 years, right? So it's really crucial from a firefighter safety standpoint and a public safety.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Good. I got you.
Number 11, Representative Petrie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director. I tell you, having been able to meet you and talk to you a little bit previously, I'm real confident in our leadership here, and I appreciate that. This is such an important agency for Georgia. I want to say a couple of things. First of all, there's a heightened awareness of what's going on. We've got places like California now, and the importance of fire. Your background, your expertise is really in fire, and I wanted to mention a couple of things. So as the chair lady alluded a moment ago, God intended the coastal plain to burn, and but we've spent a century telling people that was a bad thing. We're still trying to overcome that. So these programs related to Helene recovery that deal with fire breaks. My hope is that we're doing everything we can to get more money in those programs so we can encourage people to have those breaks, which make it easier for them to burn, which ultimately is beneficial to the totality of our folks down in the coastal plain. I want to ask you something, though. There's so many great folks that I've worked with at Georgia Forestry Commission, and we've got to make sure we retain them and keep them. You have a lot of folks that are experts in fire, and in fact, we send them all over the country to help other states. In the private sector, when people have special certifications, what we do is pay them for that credentialing. I would love to see the agency doing more of that, and I know I've mentioned that to you before, but I would love to see the agency able to pay our Forestry Commission employees more when they have this expertise and experience in fighting fires, because it's so important to the state at large. And just wanted to mention that. Appreciate all y'all are doing.
Thank you, sir, and I'm happy to pencil something out and sit down with you. So, yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Petrie. Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Sabo. First, to comment the 40,000 miles of roads that you cleared, which is phenomenal. But the rate, how fast you accomplished that is unprecedented. I want to thank you for that. We was able to get people out and be able to get those first responders to the places they needed to go. That was an amazing job. But my question, I guess, you surveyed 2,800 parcels of land.
Correct.
Are there more to go? I don't know how old this publication is. I know there's quite a backlog. How many applications, how many more plots are out there to be?
So the 2,800 that we initially put in, that was basically just to hit a confidence interval. So we felt good about our numbers and our assessment. What we're doing now is we continue to work with landowners. The EFRP program is a good one, so we can go out there and we'll know specifically where it is. We can start mapping it out. We'll start also tracking how much was harvested. So that we can turn around in the future and say, 15% of the down timber was harvested. I don't think I mentioned that before, but we know from previous storms that affect timber, just like this one did, Michael, Katrina up through Mississippi, all the way back to Hugo, ripping through South Carolina. 10 to 20% of the timber is all that's going to be harvested and utilized. So best case scenario, 80% of the timber is going to lay on the ground and rot. And so that's our intent as we're moving through and working with the landowners, is to try to figure out what's been harvested, what's not, where is our immense fuel loading, where do we need to pay attention to that they can hand that off to our protection and work with them.
One further question, if I may. Okay, I guess the reforestation grant, the process there, you fill out the application with FSA and then they notify your agency to go out and verify the property. How many of those applications are still out there, or do you know?
I don't off the top of my head. I'm happy to get it to you.
Okay.
So it's I think a lot's the technical term, but I'll get it to you. Yes,
just looking at the amount of claims so far and how much they've got allocated, it looks like quite a bit more to go.
It's quite a bit more to go. So once we know what's been claimed and what's been pushed out, it still takes a little while for FSA to work with the landowner. So traditional row cropping, they're really used to working with FSA. They already have a farm number established, right? Tree farmers are not so much. So they have to get that farm number established. They have to do everything. And so sometimes that takes a moment in that process before it gets handed off to us.
Because I filled out an application back in November and still waiting. And the federal government doesn't move with the efficiency that we do. And thank you for the rate that you respond. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I'm happy to look into that one.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Court. You were talking about equipment and the 450s that you use, John Deere's. And do you have the capability of either going to a contractor that has larger equipment or leasing a larger dozer at a certain period? And I know it's all about budget and it's all about money, but is there that capability that if you're in a dire need and you need that large piece of equipment, you can go after it?
There absolutely is, especially under extreme circumstances when we have wildfire where, we do need to pay attention to budget, but that's not what comes first. The public safety comes first. We can work with contractors, vendors, other states. We have what's called a Southeastern Compact, so it's really as simple as picking up the phone and calling our neighbors in either one of the states to get them to send their biggest and best equipment, and we do that vice versa. Usually that's the first call, just because we know their capabilities, we know what they're trained to, the standard they're trained to, we know we have common communications with them. A lot of times when we use a private contractor, we have to make sure they have all the proper PPE, that they have a radio, they have communications, those safety devices. We have used them. I feel sure we will use them again, but typically our first call is to the neighboring states.
That's good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Members of the committee, any other questions or comments that you'd like to ask the commissioner? Oh, yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Chairman. You were talking about the property owners. For the ones that need this done to their property, how do you prioritize? Is there like a rating system that lets you know we need to do these first because they're most in danger of there being a fire that we can't control?
Yep. How
do you rate them?
For our fire line program, quite simply, we didn't have enough funds to go around, so we did have a rating system. But even within that rating system, there was a lot of people that scored the same to a certain degree. So then it became down to first come, first serve as far as the application process. So it was an online application, and every application was time stamped. So it went to what was the most critical, who had highest fuel loadings around schools and communities, and take care of those first. But as we worked down that list, our breaking point was that time stamp on the application, and that's how we prioritized it. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you, Representative. Any other questions, comments? Commissioner, we appreciate everything you do.
Sure.
Deputy, we appreciate everything y'all do for us in the state of Georgia. That communication you mentioned, that's crucial.
It is.
And knowing those locals, the sheriffs and all those. So thank you for what you do for our state. We may have you back at some point in the future. The chair lady may want you to come back with a little bit more information, but keep us abreast and let us know how we can help you. And no other comments. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.